we are not so disastrous, that in the moment that we relieve some of the pressure that we put on the planet, everything can quickly turns back uh, uh, more or less flourishing with a lot of animals. That is very likely an illusion, and for sure it is in the moment that the lockdown will finish. But still, it's interesting to have a glimpse of what could happen, even with a very short time frame, if we would just disappear. In this case, we didn't disappear for real. We disappeared in the houses, but outside, the other living beings noticed it and try to take the opportunity. So yeah, there are a lot, and there are different. It's not all positive. I mean, when we remove humans, we have the positive in the sense that other animals moving into our places, but there are also situations in which humans are critical in maintaining biodiversity and some ecosystem. Both critical in the management. I don't know, let's imagine what would be of the meadows for to make hay in the mountain. If humans would manage them, they would slowly revert back to forest. But also in the sense, for example, I was reading about the African National Park where there are problems without tourists. There is not enough money flowing in. The guards are not paid, or they are not working for the lockdown, and as a consequence, poachers are escalating their activities. Here we see the double face of this retreating in our houses. That in some cases it can expose animals to other dangers when humans are there as managers or as guardians of animals in parks. And among the fake news, the one probably circulating more was about dolphins swimming in the canals of Venice. And actually, no, it was not like this. But we have been noticing incredible improvement in Venice, only just because there are no boats moving. So without the boats moving, the water is not with all the suspended material. It is clear, and everybody can see the fish there. From yesterday, there was this image of a jellyfish. On the transparent canal, you could see this jellyfish moving in one of the Venice canal. That was very nice. It was before it was really impossible to see through the water and even see a jellyfish. But before letting each of you, I have many examples, but let's go through all the positive examples and let's try to analyze a bit. Before that, I wanted to just think in non-anthropocentric terms. So if we see everything that is happening, we try not to be involved with the fact that we are all humans. It's a great ecological lesson. Yesterday I was reading an interview of David Quammen that famously wrote Spillover, this book. And he was making the great example of the Eastern tent caterpillar. Now, people from United States, they're probably familiar with it. People from Italy, they can imagine processionarie. But Eastern tent caterpillar are hairy caterpillar that live normally in the forest, evergreen forest of North America. Every now and then, because of especially favorable environmental condition, they explode. They have what is called technically in ecology an outbreak. They have an outbreak in number. So all the eggs that were laid by a huge population of butterflies become caterpillar. They collect in groups that build some tent on the branches of the tree. and they eat from the tree, but there are so many when they go, they start eating everything. They are they really to eat more, to eat a lot, and this, of course, creates a huge problem both at the trees, even at the mares that are they eat the caterpillar without realizing while grazing, and this caterpillar they cause then abortions for the mares through a mechanism in which the hair of the caterpillar become embedded into the intestinal lining of the mare, and this hair then brings pathogenic bacteria from the digestive system to the blood. It circulates, and it goes on to affect often the fetus. Kwame in the interview was saying, usually this outbreak, they go on for 1 year, 2 years, and then caterpillar disappear, and they revert back to their low density life. And this outbreak, this disappearing of the caterpillar, we discovered recently that is due to viruses. When caterpillars increase their density over a certain threshold, then viruses of the caterpillar, they find a great condition to start infecting all the caterpillar, high density, and they bring down the overall population. So if we would see what's happening now without being ethically involved in being humans, then we could see something that is happening continuously in the ecology of the planet, only this time is happening globally, and that is the role of viruses to control a population in phases of outbreak, and by controlling those populations to put revert some ecological dynamics of the population outbreak and of the effect on the remaining ecosystem. So in this sense, COVID-19 is doing very much his job. Is trying to do his job into the grand things of the planet. Of course, we are not caterpillars. We have a lot of behavioral mechanism to try to fight back, not through evolution, not genetically, but to fight back this virus through our behavior. That is the behavioral plasticity and culture that so much define humans. And in this attempt to fight back, we are locking ourselves in our houses, try to artificially reduce that density and connectivity that characterize human globally, given their billions numbers. So also this can be framed into a overall ecology of the planet, and only we need to fight this overall logical ecological mechanism, because we are the species going through an outbreak. So in these empty spaces, I guess that each of you may have some examples of how not only we see animals, more animals than plants, because plants, they are not so quick to move, of course, but we see animals reoccupying or appearing in places that until a short time ago were packed with humans. And we see at the same time, maybe among some, I don't know this, it's an hypothesis, but a longing for nature. Well, it's very easy for all of us, or those people that used to appreciate being in nature, now to long for that. But I wonder within the more wide and like a generic Western culture, if this lockdown has brought some reflection in the mind of people in their relation with nature, both because of COVID-19, probably coming from a small bath in a cave of China, both in the scene nature from your house, and especially now in spring, that it is so flourishing, and we are the one watching it from the window. So yes, I let someone else speak.
Well, I'd like to call out Paolo because the master students, we've been having some talks with Paolo every Friday for the last few weeks about the pandemic and contagion in general and past pandemics. And one of the discussions we had, we talked about how we have the separation of humans and nature, and at what point do we realize that humans are a part of nature, and that they're not something to separate. And I actually just watched a documentary this week called The Human Element, and the videographer's thesis is that there's actually 5 elements to Earth. There's air, water, land, fire, and then the 5th element is humans. And so we all 5 of these things interact with each other and influence each other. And for the last 100 or so years, humans have been influencing land. They've been influencing water, air, and fire. And it's furthering the point that I think humans have to recognize that we're not separate from this, and disease is even part of that. It's a part of nature as well. And I think some people, Ava, I don't remember if it was you who suggested, or maybe it was Kay, that we need to work with the virus in a way, which I don't know if I agree with that. I don't really know my stance yet, but it's considering how do we learn to work with nature so that we go back to this environment that sustains itself and is cyclical, and we're not just taking and damaging and then resulting in problems like global pandemics like we're seeing right now.
Yeah, Paolo, did you want to say something?
Maybe, I don't know. Well, one of the questions, I wonder if this approach of trying to see something positive in this situation from the kind of nature perspective is paradoxically very anthropocentric, if you know what I mean. Because, again, as you said, and also as Kirby just said, nature is really a strange concept.
I think it got stuck, no? Yeah. Ciao, Jonas. Oh, Khalid.
Ciao, Professor. How are you?
Fine.
Bro, I'm sorry, Professor. I have a question for you.
Yes. Hi, Valentin.
Yeah, you know, there is a lot of positive news about regarding the environment, but the same thing happened after the economic crisis of 2008, and after maybe in 2009, all the emissions were lowered and people were very positive, but then immediately as the economy went back to what it was. Sorry. Yeah, Paolo, you can continue.
Yeah, then I will try to answer Khalid. Let's leave Paolo to continue.
No, but please go ahead.
Okay.
I don't want to interrupt the conversation. No, please go.
No, it was just a question. But it's true actually what you say, Khalid, that we are in the grave danger of reverting back not only to what it was, but at a higher speed to recover what we lost economically. And already when you hear many politicians speaking, they are focused on this. Okay, we lost the economy of 1 month, 2 months. We need really to get back as soon as possible, producing as much as possible. And even you see that to compensate the loss in economic activity, some countries, well, Trump is the great example in this, they reverted the laws about environmental pollution, for example. That's like, we are doing less, then we should be allowed to do it worse. And so, yes, there is the high risk of going back to that, and I think more than a risk is a sad reality. But the more so, maybe what we see now, how we see animals behaving, it will be just a memory in some time, but it is a glimpse of the fact that we are occupying spaces, breathing air, walking forest, and smashing soil with our feet that could be habitat for many different species, that they are not there just because they don't want to share with us. We are too dangerous, we are too annoying. And there are incredible examples of this. One of the funniest one probably is about the two pandas that finally mated in the zoo of Beijing, I think, after years and years that they didn't want to mate. But who of us would like to mate in front of hundreds of visitors screaming at you? And I mean, everybody was thinking like they are animals, they should just mate and don't worry. But it's not like this. And they did it now after 1 month being alone in the zoo. With our presence, even when it is well-intentioned present, we influence the rest of the beings around us. And this influence often is that we occupy too much of the planet and they are not in the condition to share that space and time with us. We have been seeing this in the evolution of humans. There are all species that have switched from diurnal to nocturnal in order to avoid us, and wolves are a great example of this. When we are not there anymore, they will move back, and that everybody probably has a different feeling about it. I am not such a big fan of the human species, and so I'm really happy to see theirs walking in the cities of Japan, dolphins in the harbors, and I like to imagine that some of those animals, they are really checking out what's happening. I was making the other day the example of swift rondoni. That they arrived here in Italy 10 days ago. I see them late in the afternoon flying above Bra, and I'm wondering what they see and what they think, what opportunities this gave them, and sadly, how disappointing it all will be for them once everybody will get out of the house. And even in this period, birds are nesting. I'm pretty sure that some birds, they are making nests in places where they would never otherwise do it, only because humans are not around. And then they will have to abandon the nest in the moment that we all go out and parent bird realize that the nest is in a very bad position. But yes, Khalid and Calvin, we will probably get back at even higher economic speed to recover all this. And that's already embedded in the temporary solution. Because the temporary solution, besides locking ourselves at home, are money to countries to indebt themselves to advance some money to keep up with the overall life and activity until we can resume production. And all that money with which we will be, that will be part of our debt, we will need to pay it, we as a society, to pay it back by working and producing even more. And producing more in this economic system, it means extracting more in most cases. So there is not just a temporary window, but it is not a solution of anything. This period without us is like a band-aid put on a planet that had been sickened by us, knowing that that band-aid will fall off in 10 days.
I want to comment just real quickly to because I try to stay on the positive side of it, and I can see that it can be like an example of how important humans are in impacting ecosystems, because there's still a lot of people denying that ecological degradation is being caused by humans, that it be climate change or the destruction of other ecosystems. And I think that we can, once it is all over, we can refer to the time of coronavirus when we saw how strong the impact was when we stopped doing as we do usually, and show how it can be if we try to adapt. So maybe it can just function as it's a very optimistic view, but maybe it can function as as a positive hands-on experiment example for an argumentation towards protecting our ecosystems.
I've also noticed yesterday was Earth Day, and I noticed that at least the people I follow on Instagram, people were very vocal in celebrating Earth Day, more than I've ever seen before. And so I think with people like being taken away from the outside, they've started to realize how important they value like natural, like things in nature, like going hiking in the mountains and forests and things. So Jonas, like you said, it's like a change in mentality that people are starting to realize how important the planet is.
Yeah, I agree. That is what I was referring to in the maybe the perception of our role and relation, also spiritual, with the rest of nature could be evolving in this period, and that could be useful actually. Even if I think that people that didn't realize now that we have an impact on the planet, they will not be convinced by anything. But anyway, yes, it is a great reminder actually, and also maybe in this thinking about direct relations with nature, it can fit the fact that many people, they are now fermenting at home. During the lockdown, there has been this explosion of bread making, and there is a Shalom from the third year that is doing the thesis about this, about lockdown and fermenting and baking. And that can also be seen as an attempt from your house to connect with the living processes in general, in this case, those of yeast and bacteria.
And in that sense, I do agree with the positive view, because in 2008, social network wasn't that strong, and now we kind of, like everyone is allowed to speak and to have an opinion, and this kind of bread making and fermentation and have like a widespread very quickly all over the world, like regardless where you are. So I think that in that sense, it's like the way we see economics and our impact, our ecological impact, can be kind of connected in a positive way.
If I can comment on that, I think we just recently had a class where we were discussing the sustainability goals, and we were also discussing the other goals from, I don't remember the name anymore, from earlier goals, which the new goals are based on. And we were discussing the context in where they were framed, saying that in 2015, the awareness about our ecological impacts and the environmental questions were a lot of bigger than it was, I think, early 2000 or something, when the other goals were framed. And then I also read an article saying that times of crisis and disasters and drastical changes are making a very good opportunity for people to change, their behavior. They had the example of closing a road, I think, and then a lot of people took the public transport instead. And then when the road opened again, nobody drove on there. Well, some people, but they switched, the majority switched to public transport after this crisis. And I think this crisis might also be a very good platform for change. And since we've shifted, I think, our attention from maybe global health diseases, which was the main issue a couple of years ago, compared to now, where we have a much more ecological understanding, I think. So to bring some positiveness, I think that we are in a good place to make a change in these times.
Yeah. Never let a crisis go wasted. That was a famous sentence of who was some secretary of Clinton, I don't remember, an American politician that was saying every crisis has the seed of opportunity. So don't let it go wasted. And this will be a great crisis not to let go wasted. But I saw that there are some cities that are using the situation to extend the pedonal area, the area of the city where cars can't go. This is a way of exploiting the crisis, also powering public transport, powering bicycle, especially that they keep you some distance from the other, and they make you make some movement. So there are a lot of this. Just some of them, they don't threat the global economic system, and they are easier to accept and implement. But we should give some ciao. Welcome. No. We usually are keeping our microphone off, and whenever we want to intervene and speak, we turn them on. And whenever you want to speak, just turn on and speak. And never let the crisis go wasted in this sense, and it can also refer to the organization of the food system. Probably this is a crisis, and with the crisis of the supply chains, that could be used as an opportunity to reformulate the food system towards shorter chains, for example, and more locally based. So there are all these opportunities, is absolutely true, and it would be great to find ways to exploit these windows to push for improvement in the quality and sustainability of our society.
I have a question for Jonas, because you are on the border of Holland and Germany, right? And we had a talk before also, I think, on Aperitempo with each other about students being able to work on the farmlands because of the lack of migrant farmers or cheap. Do you know how that is going? Have you been able to?
Yeah, well, I know the situation for Germany. And basically what they did is they created an air bridge between Germany and Romania, and passed a law that excludes, that passes how you say, extraordinary rules for helping farming staff. And basically what they did is they flew in a bunch of Romanian people, crammed them into like basically like warehouses, and they need to keep distance and all that, but while the travels they were all like super close, and they were all jammed in one bus and in one airplane, and like all the measures completely got taken out of the force. So they basically created a loophole for the farm workers to still come, because they realized they cannot do harvest with a bunch of students that have no experience in harvesting. They cannot provide the German harvest, so they did that. And there's a lot of criticism on it. I read a very good article in The Guardian about it that criticizes it heavily, and it also shows then again the injustice between the different European countries and how Western Europe is kind of exploiting the eastern parts.
Yeah, exactly. I think I read something along the lines, or I saw something coming by past that, and I'm kind of disappointed, because I thought it was so positive to have people work on the land and feel what it's like to do that.
Yeah, but it's still in industrial agriculture. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see a big connection to nature by picking asparagus for 12 hours under the sun, you know? So that's also why students cannot really provide that, because they, after one day, they would go home and never come back. While Romanian people that are...
Yeah, but then they would know, you know? They would
they
feel it.
Yeah.
Same here in Switzerland. I try to do that as well and go and help just the farmers around. And then very quickly I realized that all the people that are doing a farm style that is already kind of sustainable and social, and they have very short, like their consumers are very closely linked. All of them, they don't have any problems now. It's very funny. And these are the guys that I know. So I called them, and they were like, "Oh, like for us, it's we have a lot to do, but or more than usual. But for the rest, it's all fine." And then I realized that the only thing for me to do would be to go work on an industrial farm. So, which is, yeah, I mean,
not ideal.
Not ideal, but that was a very, very like positive example of like all these people. They don't have a problem. They're like basically immune to the developments now, which is cool.
That's nice. I'm also, thanks to Arlette, now ordering every week at La Casa Rota, and it's really nice. Like, we still have spare veggies and we don't have to do much shopping.
I think I will start to ordering from Casa Rota, because the other that I was getting, the vegetables, now they put a stricter limit on the number of kilometers that you can travel from the farm, and Bra is not included anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pity. I have one set of positive news for all of you, but it doesn't really, well, it's not so much nature-based. I heard from friends back in Holland that they've been able, because of the time available, they've been able to make a new home for 80 refugees that have been living in a garage without facilities for months. And they now have warm beds and food and stuff. So
that's great, and that is also, we didn't never let a crisis go wasted. There is also all the topics of the illegal immigrants. This is the moment in which we should follow what Portugal did, for example, and legalize all illegal immigrants present in the country, so that they can not only obviously participate in the economy, also formally in paying taxes and having all the rights, but also being subjected to the same rights and rules for the public health. And that should be something I think that every country should do. And instead you see that Portugal, as usual, is doing something regarded as out of mind by all the other countries, every time they do it, then after some years, all the possible data, they show that they did the right thing. I'm referring here also to the legalization of all drugs that occurred in Portugal some years ago. But nobody else is following. Some idea like floated, I think, at some moment in the Italian government, but then really it appears to be that nobody picked up seriously on that. Oh, yes, that's so that's good news coming from the Netherlands. The Netherlands.
Yes, the Netherlands.
Yes.
I'm still in Bra, but
Yeah. I imagine that you're still in Bra.
Also, I noticed that there have been a lot of people with access to like a small patch of land starting food gardens, and I think also this is one of the like positive things. People not letting crisis go to waste, and I think it's just like one of the characteristics of like the general food system, almost similar to the one after the Second World War, that people wanted to use the available land to produce food. But well, obviously now we have a lot of food. People don't really like do it for, some people don't really do it for because there's a shortage of food, but because they just have time for it. But I think it's also still interesting. Me personally, I have received a couple of, because a lot of people back home, they knew that I used to run a farm. So they just called me and maybe they just remembered me because of this and asked me, like just asking questions, a lot of questions about how to start a food garden. And I thought that was really nice and maybe like one important thing in this whole situation, one other important thing in this whole situation. And also just people, I was motivated by some of the people who were continuing with the whole thing to say, oh yeah, this is really important. Now we've removed the whole lawn in front of our house and we've started a food garden and it's doing well. And I'm like, that's nice. That's really cool for me.
Yeah, thank you, Calvin. Yeah, that's really cool, very interesting. And also you mentioned how people start these activities, but they may not have all the knowledge they need, and so they contact. There is this horizontal transfer of knowledge between people like you. That I know that that guy know how to make a home garden. I know the other that is know how to make a sourdough. So you have a horizontal transfer of knowledge in this sense. But also, and that is, you mentioned after the Second World War, and for example, there were all these victory gardens in England. There were gardens planted during the Second World War to provide food to the country in war. And that is important because I am afraid that there is an elephant in the room that is not addressed, and that is food availability. I mean, we are here quiet and speaking because anyway, the supply chains that bring food to our tables, they have not been so disrupted that we find ourselves with trouble getting food. But if that didn't happen or didn't happen at the scale that we noticed it, it doesn't mean that it can't happen with further disruption. This will be a big test for the resilience of a food system and of different supply chains. But in the moment that resilience fails, then I think a whole new layer of trouble can arise, also connected with the strong social tension. People can accept logically maybe to stay home, but then people will not really be able to manage not finding food in the shops. And you already see the reaction at the beginning of all the people that stockpiled food, because this is a deep fear, I think. And that's why maybe also it's not so much addressed, but a fear that is creeping around. In this sense, the importance of home garden is really even more of what it looks like. It's just a simple home garden, but within this frame, it's much more than that.
I don't think that Elizabeth is with us here anymore, but she was in the beginning, and she was earlier today telling about an article that she read about this, but in a positive way, because there had been a study on the food supply in the US, I think, showing that a lot of people actually could have access to local produced food, but they were choosing to have food from other places. But now during this crisis, it was shown that actually the locally supply of food was very, very big and could supply the population with food. On the other hand, I think this crisis is revealing the exact opposite in other countries as well. At least back home in Sweden, the self-sufficiency is very low, which would have had a drastic impact if the import would be blocked, which is it not, but if, as you were saying.
Yeah, sorry, then I shut myself up.
Oh, if I can.
Yeah, perfect.
Because I was just after the lesson that we just had, I was looking the gastronomical talk on Facebook, and she was exactly talking about this subject and the small businesses versus the big supermarkets, and how that here in Italy that they have a really hard time because they only can sell through direct networks, and I mean the markets cannot open, a lot of small businesses cannot really work, and so they're in a very bad competitive situation with all the big supermarkets. And I think because a lot of people now also they try to go as less out of the house as possible. So it's very easy to go just to a big supermarket and buy everything that you need and then quickly go back into your house and sit back into your house. Sorry. I was also looking for some positive news, but I kind of got stuck on the economy lesson that we had, and I heard the news that Spain actually started to pay people a basic income, which I thought was very good news because I'm a big advocate of the basic income for everybody. I think we are now in a situation that the world is going to change. So we are in a scale, what is going to happen? Are we going this way or going that way? So it is a very good possibility to go the right way if we all want to, if we all have the energy to do it.
Yeah, probably you have both trends at the same time. One that in some aspect is reward in supermarkets versus small and local shops, but also another in some condition that is instead shifting some of the consumer toward emergency local suppliers. But then, as somebody was saying, after the lockdown, this can become a shift toward a form of food procurement that is more localized. So you have many different trends going on at the same time. An article I was reading was about pig farming in the United States. And that's very interesting because it's speaking about the resilience or the lack of resilience of highly hierarchical supply chain. So pig in the States, they are all raised highly in a highly intensive way. You have a producer, but then you have a very few number of slaughterhouses that belongs to 3 or 4 main companies. So you have a bottleneck in the few slaughterhouses. If you calculate the number of slaughterhouses in the United States in the last 100 years, it collapsed to few that kill a lot of animals. And the main producer is Smithfield. They have 3 slaughterhouses in 3 countries of the States, and they had to close the 3 of them because the workers fell ill. And this really strained, is straining in a hard way all the pig, pork supply chain in the United States. That's also interesting to see the differential resilience of different supply chains in this period. Ricardo, Paolo, if you have something to add, we of course, for sure, Paolo was writing something, so I'm sure that at least what you wrote, we would like to hear it.
Well, yeah, no, I don't want to be negative, you know, but so I guess, I mean, as many of you already said, I think that the main positive outcome of this strange situation is certainly a kind of raised awareness of the impact of humans on the non-human world. But then there is another question that I was trying to say before. If now well, anyway, the point is that, I mean, nature is a really strange thing. So for whom is nature? This is the question. We have to understand that nature is politics. So when we speak about the resilience of this or the resilience of that, we need to understand that we are speaking about politics. This is the big situation. So we can't address ecology if we don't think of politics, because they are really connected. So ecology and politics works together. So the big, I think if there is a positive outcome of this crisis is that we need to really reach this awareness that nature is political, and so we cannot think of the positive outcome of this crisis on nature, because capitalism and neoliberalism are already reorganizing themselves, and so the nature of this political system are already reacting. So this is the point. So we need to think another way to create a different kind of nature, and I guess that food can be a way to enter this different way of creating a different kind of nature. So this is my point. So nature is politics, and we have to think about that, precisely because of all the things that you said until now. So this is my.
I have a question for you. Does recreating nature implies creating a different economic system?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it depends on that. I mean, it is basically one thing. I mean, we separate nature from the other things, but we cannot think of nature without thinking of politics, economics, and all this kind of stuff. So we need to really rethink about all these different categories. And by the way, I mean, in this strange kind of situation, nature, the non-human par excellence, the virus, is already amongst us. So this is the a very clear demonstration that nature is already amongst us. So nature is winning. I mean, the point is how to deal with this nature. So this is the question. So there are different kind of natures that we need to think about. And what kind of nature do we want? So this is and I think this is why a gastronomic perspective can be so interesting, precisely because it links together economic systems with other things that we can call nature. This is my point, which is a little bit chaotic, I know, but yeah.
No, if I can just say one thing on what you say, I totally agree, but in me, when I think about the nature that I would want, I fall into an ethical dilemma, because the nature that I would want, I mean, implies the non-existence of what there is now, or in other really bad terms, would imply the disappearance of a big chunk of humanity. So in this, sincerely, every time I'm struggling. Because, okay, that is the same different level of seeing the planet as a non-human or seeing it as human. But yeah, I totally agree with it. But and another, maybe the two big dilemma that I confront myself with is this, and the second is how to achieve a change that is meaningful enough so that it is not a band-aid, but it is a reformulation of nature and economic system. And here the dilemma is, can you do this without revolutionizing the political system? Because if the answer is no, then I'm kind of relieved. But if the answer is we have to revolutionize also the political system, then that implies a whole level of social tension that it scares me.
Yeah.
I was also just thinking, when we talk about the natural disasters, that maybe, I don't know how to put it, like it's more like what is happening and where it's happening, then so that then we can pay attention. It's more like now that everyone else is affected, or maybe like it threatens the human species, then maybe like we then stop and pay attention. But then if now we say maybe like a particular species of a particular plant or maybe animal is disappearing, then we don't pay attention. I think maybe like I would say, even though it's for, even for me personally, it's not that clear yet, but I can tell that there is a bit of a like double standards in what we call like nature or natural disaster, and how we pay attention to different things, or on most of the time. I would say, this is just my personal opinion, that what is important to us, is it important to us, and if not, then maybe like let whoever who's dealing with a particular problem deal with it by themselves. But then if that problem that is faced by someone now affect everyone, that's when now we stop and say, hey, maybe then it's important. So yeah, I think it's really like one of the like contradictive like situations where we choose what we think it's important and maybe like ignore some other things. Of course, we cannot necessarily do everything all together, but we can maybe like also just try to talk about them as well.
I would like to add three points to what Paolo and Gabriele said. First, which kind of nature we are talking about? I mean, nature will always exist. The point is to deal with a nature that can embrace human species. That's the kind of nature we are talking about. Because nature will exist with or without humans. This is not the problem. It will organize itself in another way. So the thing, which kind of nature? This is the political also arguments that we need to discuss. Second, neoliberalism and capitalism, they are already fighting back. I mean, they are. Think about the old storytelling about the virus. We are in a war. The virus is the enemy. But which war? Which enemy? I mean, if we want to think about it, I mean, we are the enemies. We invited the ecological niche of the virus. So, which kind of war? The word, because the virus is changing our habits, is changing our words. So, but it's difficult to say. But if you look at all storytelling they are using right now, it's pro-capitalism, pro-neoliberalism storytelling.
Yeah.
Third, a positive one, of course, crises show new possibilities. For example, it shows us that the huge economical engine that once we thought unstoppable, it can be stopped. It just switch off in one day, lockdown, everything stopped. So something possible. Bruno Latour wrote an article about this that was quite interesting. So this crisis is showing us different possibilities. So that's the good part. Now we need to do politics, deal with our environment, and deal with the economics that exist right now to see if we can change something.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, ciao Zoe. I just wanted to add regarding the concept of natural disaster. That's very interesting because following what both Paolo and Riccardo was saying, natural disaster based on what understanding of nature?
I mean, the natural disaster is quite exemplary of what we are speaking about. No, is a natural disaster always really natural? I mean, I'm not sure about that. And then, I mean, again, what we mean by nature? Can we? I don't know. Is a flooding a natural disaster, or I don't know? Was Chernobyl a natural disaster? Is a pandemic a natural disaster? So this is an earthquake a natural disaster? And again, for whom? I mean,
besides questioning the adjective natural, we can question the noun disaster.
The
disaster for whom? In this case, the dilemma also following Riccardo is that it may be a disaster for us, but if we watch it from the perspective of the grand planet ecology, that's not a disaster. That's a reaction. We will call it adaptation, coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Even Chernobyl was not a disaster for nature.
No,
I mean, it killed thousands of animals, but the nature adapts. They evolved. It was a problem for humans because we cannot accept how many losses, so many losses, so many humans' life.
Yeah. Yeah, but when you analyze a so-called natural disaster, yeah, you of course have to qualify the adjective disaster, but you also soon realize that the disaster is disaster because is a political disaster. And I mean, for example, the big earthquakes that we had in Italy in the last decades are an example of this kind of political disaster rather than just natural disaster. And I guess it's the same. I mean, in for the floodings in Louisiana, I mean, they are political disasters, and of course they are disasters because they distract human lives. So this is the
it's a very anthropocentric concept.
It's
disaster, even when it is not. I remember when I was in Kenya, I was speaking with a big landowner of these private conservancies for wildlife in Laikipia. And he was complaining a lot about the fact that some Maasai put in fire part of a place of his own territory, that was a disaster, that he doesn't want any more shepherds inside his land and all this. And then the anthropologist that was with me, out of nothing, she asked, okay, but and how is, ecologically, how is this area now? And he replied, it's the greenest of the whole land. So he was defining this as a disaster, but actually the moment that you go and see the effect in every sense, it was not a disaster. It was a rejuvenating of the vegetation in one part of the land and providing more food to the different herbivores, even in the conservancy. So it's really a term, disaster, that is often used as I don't know yet the technical term, but as a term that is a disaster for everybody, when actually is anthropocentric and even not including a perspective, not including all humans. It depends from who holds the political power to define something as a disaster or not, and this reconnect with what Paolo was saying about the primacy of politics here.
And in that sense, and connecting a little bit with what Ricardo was saying, that I think that it could be a political disaster, but it can also be a political opportunity. And how through food we can address these both and kind of see food within different perspectives, not only just one way, like socially how it affects, environmentally how it affects, and how we can build politics out of this attention that food has now. And I think that's a good way of turning it into a positive outcome. Of course, it's anthropocentric way of seeing things, but we are the ones judging. So there's I don't think there's another way.
There is no wrongdoing in taking a perspective. The only wrongdoing is when you think that the perspective includes everyone and everything else. But every time we take a perspective on something.
Yeah, and I mean, it cannot be otherwise. Ours will always be a kind of anthropocentric perspective, even when we think that nature is nice, nature is good, nature is pure. Is always a kind of anthropocentric perspective. I mean, the history of ecology is the history of humans. I mean, it's a human concept. Biodiversity, it does exist because, I mean, humans exist. And Gabriele, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, probably if without humans, maybe the world would be less biodiverse than now. I mean, I guess. I mean, if you leave an ecosystem alone, probably, I mean, there will be dominant species, and there will be probably less variety. For example, this is what happens in wetlands. No, I mean, can you think wetlands, or at least a particular kind of wetlands, without thinking of the human impact in keeping that land wet? So this is or maintaining that particular ecosystem through different kind of activities. I mean, the ecological succession is without piety. I mean, there will be probably a flattening of the land, and there will be grass, and then there will be woodland. So if we have wetlands, for example, in coastal areas, this is because there are animals and pastures and people who keep the land in a such way. Otherwise, we would have just probably woodlands. And this is, yeah, again, has not only to do with humans, but with a variety of beings that can also, that often have to do with humans. So this is the, I guess. So our perspective cannot be non-anthropocentric from this. We need to be aware that our perspective is anthropocentric. So this is the trick. This is the critical shift that we need to make. Our perspective is anthropocentric, and we need to be aware of this, I guess. But it couldn't be otherwise. I can not take the perspective of a, I don't know, buffalo or a frog or I don't know, a bug, you know, or a virus.
So yeah, I partly agree. Yeah, Chiara, we are not to absolutely. It's true that there are some conditions in which human activity is able to increase the level of biodiversity and landscape diversity. You mentioned wetland, and in general, we have this situation every time humans are able to manage a succession, an ecological succession, the movement from meadows to forest. But in the course of our evolution, we have often eliminated from the ecosystem exactly those species that were performing those tasks that then we took on to manage that environment. So I don't know, Australia, the big herbivores of Australia were, before humans arrived 50,000 years ago, the big herbivores, the 3-4 meters big kangaroo and huge company, they were the one grazing all those highly seasonal grasses of Australia. And by removing the dry biomass, decreasing the number and intensity of wildfires. Once human hunted to extinction those animals, in order to manage the environment, they had to take over in different ways, of course, that ecological task, I would call it. So in the measure that in our evolution we have occupied environments and encroached with the lives of all the species, in some ways we have managed to develop enough knowledge and respect of that ecosystem in order to manage it from an ecological perspective. But most of the time we didn't, and especially because our economic system has not ecology as a principle. It's not nested into the ecology of the planet, is in antithesis to the ecology of the planet.
I'm wondering why it might be easier for us to imagine a world where we don't exist versus a world in which we can exist and not have the kind of effects on the environment that we see and we respond to. I'm like, is this a crisis of imagination, or like we are very easy? It's very easy for us to say what things would look like without us being there and in this kind of easy ecological harmony. But I'm wondering why it's hard for us not to imagine a system where we can live politically with nature. I'm thinking of like the oak, there's an ecosystem that's specific to southern Ontario. It's called an oak savanna. And it has existed for thousands of years because First Nations people were interactive with that ecology of weeding out different kinds of brush and trees so that oaks could grow. And there's nothing that can do that work. It was very intentional. It required the use of like fire and burning, controlled burning. There's no herbivore that can do controlled burning. And when the British pushed people out of that land, that oak savanna almost entirely disappeared. We only have one like of that ecosystem even exists, and that's in High Park in Toronto. And like we can still read the signs of people's engagement with that land. We can see that they grew trees so that they would point to sources of water with branches. And like to us, that's a sign where, you know, you can pay attention, you can imagine in some sense living with that environment, an environment that wouldn't exist without people. And yet it's so hard for us to translate that knowledge or that attention or that care to other systems, other ecologies, or other ways of living.
I just want to mention that healthy population of herbivores, they create the condition for controlled fire. If the koala are still alive in Australia, it is exactly because even since millions of years, when humans were not there, the ecological dynamics of many Australian environments, they would reduce the dry biomass at a level at which fires would not be big or intense enough to jump to the crown of trees. So the strategy of koala of climbing up the trees to the topest branch and waiting there for the fire to pass now is not working anymore, but it worked for millions of years, and that was thanks to those herbivore population. It is also curious that you mention oak in relation to Australia, because oaks are different species of oaks are famous not only to exploit wildfire, because a lot of small rodents and animals are flushed out of the forest and they can prey on them, but they have been shown in Australia to cause wildfire. Aboriginal people, they have said for a long time that there were oaks that were moving branches with fire from one place to another to extend the wildfire. And now we have, since recently, pictures and videos of that. They made a study and they actually saw this, that in order to improve the condition for them to hunt, oaks are spreading intentionally the fire.
Can I also reply to you, Janita? I really enjoyed your question. I think it's one of the main questions to ask right now. I would literally do another Zoom talk only about this question. And just thinking a little bit about it myself, I think it is just for all of us, and talking about myself mostly, of course, to imagine this world that you probably cannot even have a laptop, because harvesting these heavy metals in a way is not sustainable in any way to an ecosystem. We can probably say goodbye to all the fossil fuels, but how will this shape our society? And I mean, it's so in contrast of so many comforts that we have and that we're used to, that I think it feels like a sort of futuristic Star Trek kind of thing, and the road to there is still very unclear. I don't know. I would love to philosophize more about it. Yeah, but I also don't have an answer.
I guess that one of the, I guess that for us to imagine a world without us is can be easy because of course, because of historical and cultural reasons. And this has to do with, particularly with the history of environmentalism in the last, probably in the last 100 years. So if you ask the same question to, I don't know, people in the 1800s, they would have never have imagined the world without humans. So we are imbued with this idea of this romantic nature without humans, which is something that is really historically determined. I mean, is historically and culturally within, particularly U.S. North American kind of environmentalism. I guess this is how for us is so easy to imagine that kind of nature, which is, by the way, very functional to neoliberalism. And to come to the other question, why is so difficult to think about a world where we live in harmony with the non-human world, let's say, let's put it like this, is precisely because it involves a radical change of our political thinking, which is completely different. On the one hand is a very kind of imaginary idea. On the other hand is a very kind of, it involves a really a radical change. So this is, I guess, the one, at least to me, I mean, in my understanding. And this is why when I think about nature, I cannot think about politics, and I cannot think about the history of colonialism and this kind of stuff, because that idea of nature, our idea of nature as something disentangled from humans, is completely embedded within that history. In my, again, in my view, my understanding.
Just to give a contrast here, I don't have I'm not sure if I would call it a problem, but I don't have this problem where I have to imagine the world without humans for it to function better. I just feel like we've taken a weird path in evolution and we somehow need to find our way back, but it will take a lot of effort and a long time. There you go.
Yeah, I don't sound pessimistic, and I hope that, like you said, Professor, that this crisis, it might bring about self-awareness in people. But then, like when I think about it, the social impacts and the health impacts and the economic impacts are going to be so big after this crisis that it will give the politician another opportunity to remove ecology from their political discussions. And also, they will have very few people who are gonna disagree with them, because then the ecological issue, you would go to the back of the line. People will be more concerned about other issues.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, sorry.
No, go.
Yeah.
Want.
No, if somebody want to speak, I just wanted to say that I put some papers Jonas asked if I could share, but I don't know if you see them because I'm able to write only to Arlette. But there are some of those that I was mentioning. Okay, Ricardo.
Funny thing about what Yanita was saying about their question. There are a lot of people now that are trying to find answer to this question. For example, in other planets, they are investing billions of dollars to explore the space, to find the possibility to set colonies on other planets. It's actually a huge amount of money that we are spending there instead of spending in other activity, in other possibilities. So it's for me, it's a big paradox, but there are many people thinking that a solution can be to find other planets, to find other colonies, to conquer, let's say. And I don't know, I don't have any answer, of course, but this is a huge work of imagination to think about ourselves, the human species, and how we can deal with this world, what we have to change to deal with this world. And the second thing, I'm not really agree with you, Paolo, about the thing that we cannot avoid to have an anthropocentric perspective. I mean, the problem is not, for me, in the word anthropos, but in the word centric. Because not to have an anthropocentric perspective doesn't mean to have like a dog perspective or a plant perspective. I think we can have a non-centric perspective.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I absolutely agree with you. Yeah. When I say anthropocentric perspective, I mean a perspective that is, well, it's not necessarily centered on us, but is a human perspective. So yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because as humans, we have a lot of biases, but at the same time, we are capable of a huge imagination. So we can have different perspectives that can go beyond ourselves.
I think that, I'm sorry, Chiara, I will let you speak, but I think maybe you will be the last comment, because I do think that we need to wrap it up somehow. We're almost half an hour over the time and we want to let people have dinner or whatever. Everything is recorded, so we're able to look at it afterwards, and it seems like we've started a really interesting conversation, and there should be a like, how do you say? Yeah, it should continue. In
like another version of Aperitempo with this.
Definitely.
Yeah, sorry, Chiara, just before, next week we were thinking with Arlette to speak a bit about Africa, COVID-19, addressing also the locust problems. Arlette is right, Hilde also is next week.
No, it's the 7th. Yeah.
Not next week, the other one.
Yeah.
Okay, in 2 weeks. Okay. What?
But just to comment on that, I don't know if it's possible for next week, because we were still waiting for God, I forgot her name, Professor Milorini, because we wanted to also get maybe like a perspective of agriculture in terms of like some of the possible solutions for agriculture, for food security, but also on the issue of what kind of, maybe like if they were to use pesticides, if maybe there would be like solutions, what kind of solutions could there be? I mean, the easiest thing to think about is pesticide, but then is it safe for biodiversity? Which is like, we thought that it would be a good idea to have maybe like Gabriele to explain, to maybe educate us a little bit about biodiversity, or how nature would naturally just manage itself, but also how we humans would want to manage this whole situation of locusts that are taking that part of the world. And I think this is maybe like would be more, maybe like a topic that Professor Milorini would engage very well into. I don't know. I was just
I don't think I have all that knowledge for such big questions, but let's pick a date then when also Professor Migliorini can. And just it was to let the others know that we want to address also the locust and agriculture and the staff problem in Africa. Yes.
That's perfectly true. And I think we have a speaker for next week as well, and we will continuously inform all of you through email what will
Okay,
happen.
that's great. So Chiara, you have the last word probably. Arlette
I'm
wanted
gonna
to
try
stop
and
you.
recapture what I was about to spill out because it was a direct reply to what Ricardo said. It's something that I think we can think about. It's that I feel that actually we aren't centered enough, in the sense that I feel that if we truly center ourselves, we realize how connected we are. And I feel that a lot of people are, we need to reassess what it means to be centric or egocentric or centered, in a sense.
Yeah, we are egocentric before being anthropocentric, and being anthropocentric maybe is already a step in the positive direction when you start from egocentric.
Maybe the debate is between centered and situated.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Arlette,
Thank you very
Hilde.
much, all of you, for joining. It was a pleasure.
Rebecca would like to share something.
Have a good evening. Ciao, everyone.
No. Wait. Just wait one second, please.
Okay.
Rebecca, you need to unmute your mic.
Ah.
Hi, guys. Just using this moment really quick, since a lot of you guys are still in Bra, and I don't know if you know, but on Saturday is World Disco Soup Day. So we're still trying to do like a Zoom call, something like this, to cook together and hang out. And tomorrow, local is still open. Saturday, unfortunately, is not, but we collected some food already from places today. So please, if you can, come to local tomorrow, take whatever that you want to make something for Saturday, and we can do food waste reduction stuff and hang out and do something nice. So I just wanted to share really quick.
That's fantastic, Rebecca. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
So thank you, everybody. And yeah, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Much.
Ciao. Ciao.
Very
Bye,
nice
bye,
to see so
bye,
many
bye.
nice faces.